Let your eyes close. Not because you have to. Not because anything is demanding it of you. Just because the day is finished now, and the night has arrived, and there is nowhere left to be except exactly where you are, in the particular warmth of this particular moment, with the weight of your body settling completely into the surface beneath you. Breathe in and out. And let everything that was important today become a little less important, very slowly, the way the light changes at the end of an afternoon, not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually dimming until you realize, at some point you can't quite identify, that the day has become the evening, and the evening has become the night. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere old. Not old in a way that requires anything from you. Not old in a way that demands attention or analysis or the kind of alert focus that belongs to daylight and desks and the busy parts of the day. Old in the way that certain places feel old when you stand in them, that particular quality of accumulated time that makes the air feel different, denser somehow, as though the past is still present in some way that you can feel but not quite name. We are going to drift through the question of what has been lost. Not in a mournful way. The world is full of loss, and we are not here to grieve. We are here to drift, gently, through the extraordinary fact that the world we can see, the world of roads and buildings and lit windows and familiar landscapes, is only the smallest fraction of the world that has existed. That beneath the water, beneath the sand, beneath the patient, centuries-long accumulation of forest and soil and geological time, there are worlds. Complete worlds, with their streets and their kitchens and their harbor views and their particular quality of afternoon light, and their people who went about their days in the way that people always do, with small concerns and occasional wonder in the steady, daily rhythm of being alive in a specific place at a specific time. Those worlds are still there. Most of them have not gone anywhere. They have simply been covered. And there is something in that, something quietly comforting, I think, about knowing that the world is very good at keeping things. That the ocean floor is full of things. That the desert sand is full of things. That the jungle, patient and persistent and growing always, holds within it everything it has ever grown over. Nothing is truly gone. It is only waiting. We are going to drift through some of those waiting worlds tonight. Through the ones that shimmer at the edge of memory and science and the long reach of archaeology. Through civilizations that rose in places the sea has since swallowed, and cities that the desert buried gently, room by room, while their last inhabitants had already moved on. Through a story that a philosopher told in Athens 2,500 years ago that has never quite stopped echoing, and through the real catastrophe, the real buried city, the real frescoes still the colors of their first morning, that may have inspired that story in ways we're still working to understand. We will move slowly. We will linger. Nothing here requires hurrying. Somewhere between what I tell you and what your mind makes of it in the dark, the past will open, very gently, and then close again. And by the time it closes, I hope you'll be somewhere between this room and sleep, floating in that comfortable, borderless territory where the history of the world stops being information and becomes simply the quality of the darkness around you. Let's begin with the ocean. There is something the ocean does that no other thing on earth does quite so completely. It moves. Constantly. Without rest, without intention, without the slightest awareness of what it moves over, what it covers, what it has swallowed over the course of the millions of years during which it has been doing exactly this, moving. The tides pull and release in their reliable, twice-daily rhythm. The currents trace their great loops around the ocean basins, moving warmer water toward the poles and colder water back, in a system so large that a single circulation can take 1,000 years to complete. And through all of that enormous, indifferent movement, the ocean floor stays still. The ocean floor is one of the quietest places in the world, which is a strange thing to say about a place that is also one of the noisiest. The sound of water is constant there, the pressure enormous, the movement of currents and creatures producing a kind of continuous low-frequency presence. But beneath all of that, the floor itself is still. The sediment settles slowly, continuously, a few millimeters per 1,000 years, covering everything with the patient accumulation of time. Whatever is down there stays down there. The ocean is very good at keeping things. What is down there is one of the great, mostly unexplored archives of human history. We know, because geology tells us clearly, and the evidence is conclusive, that sea levels around the world were dramatically lower during the last ice age, when so much of the Earth's water was locked in continental ice sheets. At the peak of the last glaciation, approximately 20,000 years ago, sea levels globally were something like 120 meters lower than they are today. 120 meters. The number is worth sitting with, because its implications are enormous. Where there is now open ocean, at depths of up to 120 meters, there was once dry land. Substantial, livable, ecologically rich dry land. The continental shelves, those underwater extensions of the continents, relatively shallow compared to the deep ocean floor before they drop away, were, for most of human prehistory, not underwater at all. They were above the surface. They were part of the world. People walked on them, camped on them, hunted animals across them, fished in their rivers, built their shelters on their plains, and lived ordinary human lives on ground that is now the floor of the sea. The coast of Australia extended much farther north than it does today, with a land bridge connecting it to Papua New Guinea across a region now called the Sahul Shelf. In the far north, the Bering Strait between Asia and North America was dry land, a broad, grassy, biologically rich territory called Beringia, across which the ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the Americas made their crossing, not as a dramatic heroic journey over ice but as a slow, multi-generational drift southward through what was simply the most northerly part of the continuous landmass they already inhabited. And in the waters of what is now the North Sea, between the coast of what we know as England and the coastline of what we know as the Netherlands and Denmark and Germany, there was land. There was a great deal of land. A landscape that archaeologists have given the name Doggerland, after the Dogger Bank, the shallow underwater plateau that is its most notable remnant, now a productive fishing ground and the proposed site of enormous offshore wind farms, a landscape that was, for thousands of years, one of the most habitable and abundant environments in the world. We will come back to Doggerland in a while. It deserves its own time, its own particular attention, and I don't want to rush past it. What I want you to hold, for now, is simply the image of what it means that the ocean covers what it covers. That the sea level rising, not catastrophically, not in a single dramatic event in most places, but steadily and inexorably, a meter per century in the most active periods, enough to watch over the course of a human lifetime as the water came closer and closer to the place where you had always lived, that this process, this slow patient inundation, transformed the world, changed the coastlines, swallowed the lowlands, covered the river valleys, put 40 or 60 or 80 meters of salt water between the surface of the world we know and the surface of the world that was. And everything that was on that earlier surface, the campsites, the hearths, the middens full of shells and fish bones and the detritus of ordinary meals, the wooden stakes of fish traps still standing in the mud, the routes between one community and another, the high ground where the dead were buried, all of it is still there. Underwater, but still there. Slowly being covered by the patient accumulation of sediment, preserved by the cold and the dark, waiting. The fishing trawlers of the North Sea know this in the most direct possible way. The long drag nets they pull along the seafloor occasionally bring up things that do not belong to any era of fishing. A mammoth tooth, dark and enormous, hauled up in a net full of flatfish. A piece of antler, worked, shaped by human hands, unmistakably a tool, something that someone held and used for a specific purpose on a day when the North Sea was not the North Sea but a river valley with forests on its banks. A human skull, found in a net and turned over to archaeologists who date it and find it 20,000 years old. The sea floor is giving things back, very slowly, in the small windows that the trawl nets open. And now there are better tools. Sonar surveys that map the sea floor with enough resolution to see not just the depth but the texture, the ridges and channels that are the ghost topography of landscapes that were drowned. Blue archaeology is the name given to this emerging field, the systematic underwater survey of submerged prehistoric landscapes, and what it is beginning to show is astonishing. The outlines of river systems, still visible in the sediment, because a river channel fills differently than the surrounding land when the sea rises over it. The shapes of what may be middens, the ancient rubbish heaps, full of shell and bone and charcoal, that are among the richest archaeological sites on land and that must, logic insists, exist in equivalent abundance on the sea floor. The suggestion of structures, here and there, in places where the sediment has not yet covered everything. It is early work. The technology is new and the sea floor is vast. But the direction of the work is clear, and what it is moving toward is a reckoning with how much of the human story has been sitting in the cold and dark, unhurried and uncatalogued, while we have been looking only at the parts of the world that stayed above the water. Breathe out slowly. Let the ocean be large around you, in your imagination, in the comfortable darkness of wherever you are lying right now. Let it be as large as it actually is, covering 70% of the Earth's surface, averaging more than 3.5 kilometers in depth, so vast that all of the continents could fit within the Pacific Ocean with room to spare. And somewhere in all of that immensity, in the shallow water along the edges of the continental shelves, in the places where the water is only 40 or 60 or 80 meters deep rather than 3 or 4 kilometers, there is the oldest unexcavated record of human life on Earth. All of it patient. All of it waiting. The ocean has all the time in the world. In the 4th century before the Common Era, in the city of Athens, a philosopher sat down to write a story. His name was Plato. He was, by the time he wrote the story that concerns us, already old, in his mid-70s or thereabouts, already the author of the dialogues that would eventually be considered among the most important works of philosophy in the Western tradition. The Republic, the Symposium, the Phaedo. He had been writing and teaching for decades, running the academy, the institution he had founded, shaping the thinking of generations of students. He was one of the most eminent thinkers in the ancient world. And in approximately 360 BCE, he wrote about Atlantis. The story appears in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, a pair of related works that seem to have been intended as a connected sequence, though the Critias breaks off unfinished, mid-sentence, in a way that has puzzled scholars ever since. The two works together contain everything we know about Atlantis from its original source. Every book, every documentary, every theory, every expedition that has ever set out to find the lost continent, all of it traces back to these two dialogues. To this one man, sitting in Athens in the 4th century before the Common Era, writing. Plato was a philosopher. He was not a historian, not a scientist, not an investigative reporter. He wrote philosophical dialogues, a form in which arguments and ideas are explored through conversations between characters, some of them historical figures and some of them more representative of positions or ways of thinking. The dialogues are not transcripts of real conversations. They are carefully constructed literary works designed to explore philosophical questions, and their characters are vehicles for ideas as much as they are people. This is important to hold gently in mind, because it shapes how we understand what Plato is doing when he tells the Atlantis story. The framing of the story is elaborate. Critias, one of the characters in the dialogues, claims to be passing on a story he heard from his grandfather, who heard it from the Athenian statesman Solon, who heard it from an Egyptian priest in the city of Sais while he was traveling in Egypt. The priest, according to this chain of transmission, showed Solon ancient records of an event that the Greeks had forgotten, the conflict, 9,000 years before Solon's time, between Athens and Atlantis. 9,000 years before Solon would put the date at roughly 9,600 BCE. Which would mean the events described occurred during the late Paleolithic, when the Ice Age was ending and the sea levels were rising, when the world looked very different from the world of either Plato's Athens or our own time. Whether this is a specific and meaningful historical claim embedded in the story, or simply the kind of enormously deep past that philosophers reach for when they want to discuss events before the beginning of recorded history, is something scholars have argued about for more than 2,000 years without reaching a conclusion. What Plato describes is this. Atlantis was an island, or a continent, larger than Libya and Asia combined, he says, which suggests something vast, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the ancient name for what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow passage between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. In Plato's time, the Pillars of Hercules marked the boundary of the known world, the edge of the familiar Mediterranean basin, beyond which lay the open Atlantic, unknown and immense. And in that unknown ocean, Atlantis. Plato describes it with a specificity that has intrigued readers ever since, because the details are so particular, so architectural, so clearly the product of either careful imagination or some kind of source material. The city at the heart of Atlantis was built on a circular plan, with alternating rings of land and water, 5 rings in total, the rings of water navigable by ships and connected by canals cut through the land rings. At the very center, on the innermost island, stood the royal palace and the great temple of Poseidon, the sea god from whom the royal line of Atlantis descended. The palace had hot springs and cold springs, channeled into bathhouses of different temperatures. The walls of the innermost precinct were covered with bronze, tin, and the mysterious metal orichalcum, mountain copper, as the Greek name translates, a substance whose identity has never been satisfactorily established, which may have been an early brass alloy, or a real or whose name was lost along with the culture that named it, or something that existed entirely within Plato's imagination. There were horse racing tracks. There were markets. There was a great outer harbor filled with ships, so full of commercial activity and the noise of a busy port that the sound of it carried constantly throughout the city. And around the central island, the alternating rings of water and land created an urban geography of extraordinary and slightly dreamlike regularity, perfect circles, each one wider than the last, spreading outward from the royal center the way ripples spread from a stone dropped in still water. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. Let the city form slowly, in whatever way it forms for you. The rings of water, dark in the evening light, reflecting the fires along the harbor walls. The temple of Poseidon at the center, its bronze and tin and orichalcum walls catching the same light, glowing. The ships in the outer harbor, their sails furled for the night, the crews ashore, the smell of salt water and wood smoke and whatever the Atlanteans ate for dinner on an ordinary evening when nothing of historical significance was happening. Plato tells us that Atlantis fell because its people, over generations, gradually lost the divine virtue that had originally made them great. That they became greedy and corrupt and expansionist, reaching for more than their appropriate portion of the world. And that the gods, specifically Zeus, the king of the gods, watching from his divine perspective, decided that the Atlanteans needed to be punished. What form that punishment took is something Plato only begins to describe before the Critias breaks off. But from the Timaeus we know the outcome. In a single day and a single night, the island of Atlantis sank beneath the ocean. The sea closed over it. And the ocean that lies beyond the Pillars of Hercules became unnavigible, choked, Plato says, with the shallows left by the sunken island, a shoal of mud that made the passage impossible for ships. This is Plato's story. It is a beautiful one. Most classical scholars, for what it is worth, believe it is fiction. That it is a philosophical parable, the story of a great civilization brought low by its own moral corruption, a warning about the dangers of imperial ambition and the distance that power can put between a people and its better nature. Plato was very interested in the question of what makes a just society and what causes societies to fail, and the Atlantis story serves that interest perfectly. But there is a question that the story doesn't entirely close: what inspired it? Plato was a careful thinker. He did not invent without purpose. The specific details of the Atlantis account, the hydraulic engineering, the precise architectural geometry, the specific metals, the horse tracks, these have the quality of either very careful invention or some dimmer, older source. Folk memories of real places and real events, passed down through generations of oral tradition, distorting with time but preserving something. The pattern of a real city, its specific qualities lost but its general shape remaining. We don't know. We genuinely don't know. And perhaps that is enough, to sit with the uncertainty, and with the story itself, and with the beautiful image of those concentric rings of water and land, reflecting firelight, in a city that either was or was imagined to be, somewhere in the early darkness before history began its patient written record. There is a real island in the Aegean Sea that did, in fact, catastrophically disappear. Not quite in the way that Plato describes. Not in a single day and night, not in quite the scale that Plato imagines. But in a volcanic event of enormous power that destroyed a flourishing Bronze Age city, sent a tsunami across the eastern Mediterranean, contributed to the decline of one of the most sophisticated civilizations of its era, and left behind a landscape so dramatically altered that even today the island wears its catastrophe on its face. The island is called Santorini now. It was called Thera in antiquity. And before the middle of the 17th century BCE, approximately 1600 BCE, though the exact date is still debated among volcanologists and archaeologists, it was a substantially larger, more or less circular island with a volcanic peak at its center and, on its southern slope, a city. The city was called Akrotiri. Akrotiri was a Minoan-influenced Bronze Age community, not Minoan exactly, but deeply connected to the broader Aegean culture centered on the great palace civilization of Crete. It was a prosperous, sophisticated, cosmopolitan place. A port city, primarily, positioned on one of the maritime routes that connected the civilizations of the eastern Mediterranean, Egypt to the south, the Levant to the east, Crete and mainland Greece to the west and north. Ships would have been a constant presence in the harbor below the city, loading and unloading the goods that flowed through the Aegean trade networks, copper from Cyprus, tin from somewhere in the east or north, fine textiles from the palace workshops, grain, oil, wine, luxury goods of every kind. The city had multi-story buildings. Not just large buildings, actually multi-story, the upper floors sometimes accessible by staircases, the ground floors of some structures used for storage while the families who owned them lived above. The buildings were made from volcanic stone quarried locally, fitted together with skill. The streets between them were narrow and winding, as the streets of Mediterranean port cities tend to be, following the logic of shade and airflow rather than any formal plan. And there was indoor plumbing. Ceramic pipes, fired in kilns, fitted together in runs that carried fresh water through the walls and floors of the buildings. A water distribution system in a Bronze Age city, approximately 3,600 years ago. The engineers who designed this system understood pressure and flow. They understood that water could be made to travel through enclosed channels without the level of the source needing to be higher than the level of the destination at every point along the route. The pipes in Akrotiri are as sophisticated as the concept allows, given the materials of the era. All of this we know because the city was preserved. Not rescued from the eruption. Preserved by it. The Thera eruption was one of the largest volcanic events in the past 10,000 years, a Plinian eruption of sufficient scale that its ashfall has been identified in ice cores from Greenland, in lake sediments from Anatolia, in archaeological layers across a vast region of the eastern Mediterranean. The eruption created the caldera that defines Santorini's shape today, that iconic crescent of land around a circular deep-water bay, the bay itself the collapsed remnant of the volcanic summit that the eruption destroyed. Before the main eruption, there were warning signs. Earthquakes, probably. Smaller eruptions, precursors to the main event. and the people of Akrotiri read those signs, or felt them, and left. This is one of the most remarkable things about Akrotiri. No bodies have been found there. None. In a city that may have housed several thousand people, in ruins that have been excavated carefully and systematically since the 1960s, the archaeologists have found no human remains in the ash layers that preserved the city. The people got out. They organized themselves, gathered what was portable and valuable. We can tell what they took by what is conspicuously absent from the ruins, the gold and silver that should be there in a prosperous city and simply isn't, and they went. Where they went, we don't know. Perhaps to nearby islands. Perhaps to Crete, where their trading partners lived. Perhaps they were absorbed into other communities and their descendants are still there, in the islands of the Aegean, carrying the specific genetic heritage of a people who watched their island fill with ash and more ash, and whose city lay buried and preserved under that same ash for 3,600 years. What they left behind is extraordinary. The frescoes. The interior walls of the buildings at Akrotiri were painted. Not just in the grand ceremonial rooms, though those paintings are the most elaborate, but throughout the buildings, in living areas and workspaces and rooms whose function is still being determined. The volcanic pumice and ash that buried the city sealed the paintings, protected them from air and light and the degradation that sunlight causes in pigments, and preserved them in colors that still, when they emerged from the excavation, were vivid. Still themselves. Still the colors that the painter mixed and applied to the wet plaster of the wall on a specific morning in the 17th century BCE. There is a fresco called the Spring Fresco that has become one of the most beloved images from the Bronze Age. It shows red lilies, a specific species, identified by botanists, that still grows in parts of the Aegean, growing from rocks that are depicted in the abstracted, layered style of Aegean Bronze Age art. Between the lilies, swallows. Not generic swallows, but swallows in flight, swallows dipping toward the flowers, swallows whose movement is captured with a lightness and an accuracy that says, clearly, that the person who painted this had watched swallows in spring and found them worth recording. The whole fresco has the quality of something observed, a specific spring, a specific hillside with its red lilies and its swallows, painted by someone who found it beautiful and wanted that beauty to persist on a wall. It persisted for 3,600 years in the dark. There are blue monkeys. This always surprises people, blue monkeys, painted on the walls of a Bronze Age city in the Aegean. They are unmistakably monkeys, specifically long-tailed monkeys identifiable by zoologists as Egyptian or possibly African species, brought to the Aegean world through the trade networks that connected these Bronze Age cultures. Blue, because the artists of the Aegean Bronze Age used blue, the blue that came from the mineral azurite, or sometimes from the Egyptian blue that was manufactured as a pigment, for figures that had a particular status or significance in their visual vocabulary. The blue monkeys are not naturalistic. They are icons of something, of the exotic, of the faraway, of the reach of the trade network that brought living monkeys from Africa to the Aegean, and whose presence was striking enough to commemorate on a wall. And there is the ship fresco, a long, horizontal painting that wraps around a room and depicts what appears to be an entire maritime expedition. Multiple ships, with their crews, sailing between what appear to be different towns. The towns have their own architectural detail, buildings, people watching from rooftops, animals at the waterfront. The sea between the ships has dolphins, which leap and arc in the water in a way that is instantly and recognizably accurate to anyone who has watched dolphins around boats. The whole fresco is a miniature world, a snapshot of a maritime civilization at a particular moment of its activity, detailed enough that scholars have spent decades analyzing it for information about Bronze Age ship construction and navigation and trade. All of this, sealed in ash. Waiting. The site of Akrotiri today is excavated under a protective modern roof, a large shed-like structure built to shield the ruins from weather while the work continues. New finds emerge every season. The ash that buried the city is still yielding things: stored goods in ceramic vessels, tools, the contents of rooms, the arrangement of furniture. Each thing that emerges adds another detail to the picture of a community that went about its life, in its specific way, until the day it left. The city stayed. The city is still there, under its protective roof, still giving up the last things it kept. Let me take you back to the North Sea. Or rather, let me take you to the place that was there before the North Sea was there, because the North Sea, as a body of water, is relatively young. It has existed in something like its current form for only about 8,000 years. Before that, the land was there. The people were there. The rivers were there. Doggerland. The name sounds ancient, though it isn't. It was coined by the geologist Clement Reid in 1913, named for Dogger Bank, the shallow underwater plateau that was once Doggerland's highest ground. The naming was recent, but the place it names was one of the longest inhabited landscapes in European prehistory. People lived in what is now the North Sea basin from at least 12,000 years ago, probably considerably longer, and they continued to live there as the seas slowly rose around them for thousands of years, retreating gradually to higher ground as the coastlines moved inward, adapting to the changing landscape with the flexibility that Mesolithic people had always brought to a world in constant, if slow, transformation. What was Doggerland like? It was nothing like the gray, windswept, featureless expanse of water that occupies that space today. Doggerland was a landscape of extraordinary ecological richness, exactly the kind of landscape that Mesolithic hunter-gatherers thrived in, that provided everything they needed in concentrated abundance. There were rivers. Major rivers, some of them very large, flowing westward through the basin and eventually joining the ancestral Rhine and Thames systems in a combined river that discharged into the Atlantic somewhere south of what is now Cornwall. These rivers created river valleys, the low, sheltered, biologically productive landscape that hunter-gatherers prized above almost any other environment. River valleys had fish. They had the mammals that came to drink. They had the birds that nested in the reed beds. They had the edible plants that grew in the wet margins. They had the wood for fires and tools and the shelters that these people built and abandoned and built again as they moved through the landscape in their seasonal patterns. Around the rivers, the uplands, lower than the mountains of Britain or Scandinavia, but substantial enough to offer a different ecology, a different set of resources, a different perspective on the world. Open woodland, perhaps, in the warmer periods. Heathland. The kinds of elevated terrain where deer grazed and could be hunted, where the view extended far enough to track the movement of animals across the landscape below. And on the western and southern edges, as the land approached what would become the English Channel, coastal marshes and estuaries where the land met the sea in the gradual, complex, biologically extraordinarily rich way that estuaries always do. Reed beds taller than a person. Mudflats rich with shellfish. The meeting of fresh and salt water that creates the conditions for the most productive ecosystems in the world. The people of Doggerland lived in this. They moved through it in groups that were probably relatively small, a few dozen people, families connected by kinship and alliance, moving along routes they knew from childhood and their parents had known from childhood, camping in the places where experience said the fishing was reliable in this season or the deer gathered at this time of year. They were not wanderers in any aimless sense. They were people with deep, specific, multi-generational knowledge of a specific landscape, using that knowledge to live well in a place that gave them everything they needed. We know their tools. We know them well, because the tools have survived in the North Sea sediment and in the peat layers that formed in the wetland areas of Doggerland before the sea covered them. Flint microliths, tiny, precise pieces of flaked flint that would have been hafted into wooden or bone handles to create cutting tools, scrapers, points. Barbed bone points for fishing. Wooden artifacts, paddles, stakes, structural elements, preserved in the anaerobic conditions of the peat that formed in the wet areas. Antler tools, shaped and used for specific purposes, carrying the marks of the hands that worked them. Some of what the trawlers have brought up over the years is even more evocative than tools. Bones of extinct animals, woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, the species of the Ice Age world that persisted in Doggerland while the climate warmed and eventually disappeared. And occasionally, human remains. A skull, dated by radiocarbon to the Mesolithic period, found in a fishing net and handed to archaeologists. A leg bone. A fragment of jaw. The physical remainder of people who walked the forests of the North Sea basin when those forests were above the water, whose descendants are still genetically traceable among the populations of Northern Europe. The geneticists can find them. The Mesolithic hunter-gatherers of northwestern Europe, including the people of Doggerland, were a distinct population, darker skinned than modern Northern Europeans, predominantly, and blue eyes, a combination we would probably find striking if we encountered it today. Their genetic signature has been identified in modern European populations, where it persists alongside the genetic contributions of the farmers who arrived from Anatolia several thousand years later and the steppe pastoralists who arrived after them. The people of Doggerland are part of the ancestry of the people who live in Britain and northwestern Europe now. Their DNA is in living bodies. They are not entirely gone. But their landscape is gone. The landscape that shaped them, that they knew in all its seasonal detail, that was the entire world of their existence, that is 40 meters underwater. The Storegga slides changed things catastrophically. About 8,200 years ago, an enormous section of the Norwegian continental shelf, an underwater landslide of staggering scale, the largest known submarine landslide in human history, gave way. The collapse generated a tsunami that propagated across the North Sea. Models suggest that the wave would have reached the coasts of Doggerland and northern Britain within hours, inundating the low-lying coastal and estuarine areas that were among the most densely inhabited parts of the landscape. What happened to the people who were in those places when the wave arrived, we do not know. There is evidence in the archaeological record of Scotland and northern Britain, a layer of marine sand deposited well inland of any normal storm surge, at a height above the contemporary sea level that can only be explained by a tsunami, that confirms the event happened and reached the coasts. Whether the low communities of Doggerland had any warning, whether they saw the sea behave in the strange way that preceding the arrival of a tsunami, the sea withdrawing suddenly and dramatically before the wave returns, and knew to run, we cannot say. What we can say is that after the Storegga tsunami, the occupation of Doggerland diminished rapidly. Whether the tsunami destroyed the last significant communities there, or whether it simply accelerated a process of retreat that was already underway as the seas rose and the land shrank, is not fully resolved. But within a few centuries of the Storegga event, Doggerland was gone. The North Sea had closed over it. And where the river valleys had been, and the estuaries, and the high ground of Dogger Bank, there was only water. The water is still there. The landscape is still there beneath it, preserved in the sediment and the peat. The bathymetric surveys that map the sea floor with sonar can still trace the outlines of the old river channels, their shadows in the sediment, the way they filled differently from the surrounding land as the sea rose over them. The river that flowed through what is now the Dogger Bank, on its way to join the ancestral Rhine system, is still visible in the data. A river that no one has seen for 8,000 years, still legible in the mud. All of it patient. All of it still there, under the gray water of the North Sea, waiting for the next trawl that brings something to the surface, waiting for the next sonar survey that reads another portion of the old landscape in its data. The fishermen of the North Sea have always known, without knowing exactly what they knew, that there was something down there. They have been pulling things out of the nets for centuries. It is only recently that we have understood what those things mean, that the mammoth tooth and the worked antler and the occasional, startling human bone are not curiosities but documents. A library that the sea has been keeping, in its cold and patient way, against the day when someone finally comes to read it. There is a collapse of the ancient world so complete, so widespread, so apparently simultaneous, that historians have given it a name that sounds like an ending, the Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BCE, approximately, because the archaeology suggests a period of several decades rather than a single moment, the great palace civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East suffered catastrophic disruption. Some of them did not survive it. The civilization of the Mycenaean Greeks, with their massive stone citadels and their linear administrative bureaucracy and their long-distance trade networks, effectively ended. The great cities of the Hittite Empire, centered in Anatolia, modern Turkey, were destroyed or abandoned. Ugarit, the cosmopolitan Syrian port city that had been one of the most commercially and culturally sophisticated places in the ancient world, was destroyed and not rebuilt. Cyprus was badly disrupted. Egypt, the most resilient of the major powers, survived but severely weakened, contracting from its imperial height to something smaller and more defensive. Within the span of a few decades, a world that had been extraordinarily connected, that had maintained trade networks linking Egypt to the Levant to Cyprus to the Aegean Islands to mainland Greece to Anatolia, moving copper and tin and grain and textiles and wine and olive oil and luxuries of every kind across thousands of kilometers of sea and overland routes, simply stopped functioning in that connected way. The causes are still genuinely debated. Climate change, specifically a prolonged drought that disrupted agriculture across the eastern Mediterranean, is now the leading hypothesis. There is good paleoclimate evidence that a severe drought lasting roughly 150 years affected the region starting around 1200 BCE, putting enormous stress on agricultural systems and the palace economies that depended on agricultural surplus. Earthquake storms, clusters of large earthquakes striking multiple sites in a relatively short period, may have contributed to the physical destruction of some of the palace centers. The disruption of the trade networks themselves may have created a kind of cascading failure, where the interdependence that had made the system so productive became a vulnerability when any part of it stopped functioning. And there were the Sea Peoples, groups of migrants and warriors arriving from somewhere to the west and north, mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions as a major threat of the period, whose identity and origin are still not fully understood. Probably all of these things, together. Systems as complex as the interconnected Bronze Age Mediterranean world have complex failure modes. What I want to linger on is not the failure itself but what existed before it, and what it felt like when it was gone. The palace economy of Mycenae was a bureaucracy. A sophisticated, literate, quantitative bureaucracy, tracking the resources and outputs of an agricultural society with tablets of clay pressed with Linear B script, the oldest surviving form of the Greek language, deciphered in 1952 by the architect Michael Ventris in one of the great intellectual feats of the 20th century. The tablets that survive from Mycenae and from the other Mycenaean palace sites record, in meticulous detail, the workings of the palace economy, so many jars of olive oil, so many fleeces of wool, so many workers receiving their rations, so many rowers owed to the fleet. The texture of the record is administrative, mundane, completely practical, and completely alive with the reality of the palace economy's daily operation. Someone counted those jars. Someone recorded those fleeces. Someone sat in a room in the palace of Mycenae or Pylus or Tiryns with a lump of wet clay and a stylus and pressed the marks into the clay surface, and then the tablet was set aside to dry, and it may or may not have been important enough to bake hard in a kiln for permanent storage. Most of the Linear B tablets that survived did so because the palaces burned, and the fire hardened the clay tablets that would otherwise have dissolved back into mud over time. The tablets survived because the palaces burned. Ugarit was a city-state on the Syrian coast, just north of what is now the city of Latakia. It was one of the great entrepot cities of the late Bronze Age, a place where multiple cultures met and transacted business and diplomacy and cultural exchange. Merchants from Egypt lived there alongside merchants from the Aegean Islands and from Cyprus and from the Hittite Empire to the north. The city's scribes could write in multiple scripts, Ugaritic, which was its own alphabetic script used for local language and literature, but also Akkadian cuneiform, the international diplomatic language of the ancient Near East, used for correspondence with foreign powers. The city had a rich literary tradition. Mythological texts written in Ugaritic have been found there that predate the Hebrew Bible but share some of its themes and poetic forms in ways that illuminate the shared cultural background of the ancient Near East. And then, around 1185 BCE, the city was destroyed. What makes Ugarit's end particularly poignant is the archive of letters found there, correspondence from the final period, including several that describe the situation in the months or years before the destruction. There is a letter from the king of Ugarit to the king of Alashiya, ancient Cyprus, describing enemy ships at sea. The fleet of Alashiya is asked for help. The situation is urgent. The king of Ugarit writes that enemy forces have burned his cities, that there is no grain and no food, that the situation is desperate. And there is another letter, found still in the kiln where it was being fired at the moment the city fell. The clay had not finished hardening. The letter had not been sent. The reply to some earlier communication, pressed into the wet clay by a scribe who would never finish his work, was still in the process of becoming a permanent document when the permanence came from an entirely different direction. The letter is in the Louvre Museum now. If you were to hold it, and of course you cannot, it is extremely fragile and extremely old, but if you were to hold it in your mind, in the imagination, you would be holding something that was made urgent and important in a moment of crisis, that never reached its recipient, that was instead preserved for 3,200 years by the very catastrophe that prevented its delivery. After Ugarit fell, it was not rebuilt. The site was abandoned. The palace remained, buried under the debris of its own destruction, gradually covered by the accumulation of centuries until archaeologists began excavating it in 1929. The kiln was there. The unfinished letters were there. The entire archive of a cosmopolitan Bronze Age city was there, waiting. What followed the Bronze Age collapse in Greece was, for several centuries, a quieter time. Not better, necessarily, but quieter. Smaller communities, less administrative complexity, shorter trade networks, more local production. Writing disappeared, linear B was not used after the collapse, and the knowledge of it was lost. The population declined. The elaborate palace economies with their specialized labor and their records and their far-flung supply chains contracted into something simpler. It was, in a way, a rest. A long, dark, quiet interval between one complexity and another. And out of that quiet interval, eventually, something new emerged, the archaic Greek period, beginning around 800 BCE, with a new writing system borrowed from the Phoenicians, new trade networks, new ways of organizing political life, new ways of thinking about the world. The foundations of what we call classical civilization, laid on the rubble of the one that collapsed. The world rests sometimes. It contracts and simplifies and grows quiet, and then it begins again, in a different form, carrying forward whatever survived the interval. In the southeastern corner of Turkey, near the modern city of Sanliurfa, a city that already has several thousand years of documented history behind it, there is a limestone ridge, and on that ridge, something that changes almost everything we thought we understood about how human civilization develops. Göbekli Tepe. The name in Turkish means Potbelly Hill, which is not the grandest name for what may be the most significant archaeological site in the world. The hill bulges slightly from the surrounding landscape in a way that suggested to local people that something was buried beneath it, and they were right. What was buried was not what anyone expected. Göbekli Tepe is a series of circular stone enclosures, roughly like the shapes of stone circles, though much older than Stonehenge and different in their architecture, built approximately 11,500 years ago. 11,500 years. That number is hard to hold because it is so much larger than most of what we call history. The pyramids of Giza are approximately 4,500 years old. Stonehenge, in its main construction phase, is roughly 5,000 years old. The earliest cuneiform writing from Mesopotamia is approximately 5,200 years old. And Göbekli Tepe is 11,500 years old. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years. And it was built not by the kind of organized, settled, agricultural civilization that we assume to be necessary for monumental construction. It was built by hunter-gatherers. This is the thing that Göbekli Tepe has changed in our understanding of human prehistory, and it is worth pausing on it because it is genuinely remarkable. For a long time, the conventional understanding of how civilization develops followed a sequence. First, agriculture, which creates food surplus. Food surplus allows some people to be freed from the immediate work of producing food. Those people can specialize, they can become craftspeople, administrators, priests, builders, and that specialization is what makes complex social organization possible, including the organization needed to build large monuments. Göbekli Tepe doesn't fit this sequence. Its builders were hunter-gatherers who, as far as we can tell from the archaeological evidence, had not yet developed agriculture. And yet they built these stone enclosures, with their massive T-shaped pillars, some of them 5.5 meters tall, some weighing up to 10 tons, arranged in careful circles, decorated with intricate bas-relief carvings of animals. The animals on the pillars at Göbekli Tepe are extraordinary. Foxes, vultures, scorpions, cranes, wild boar, lions, leopards, snakes, and some more abstract forms, handbags, H-shaped symbols, whose meaning is lost to us entirely, because the people who made them left no writing, and the tradition that would have explained the symbols died with the communities that held it. What we have is the image without the text, the form without the interpretation. The pillar carvings are not simple scratches. They are accomplished relief sculpture, carved into the limestone with stone tools by people who had clearly learned this skill through practice, who understood how to work the stone to produce the depth and the clarity of form that the images display. This is not the first attempt at carving. This is mature skill, the product of a long tradition of practice. Which means the artistic tradition predates the monuments themselves, which means we are missing something, some earlier phase of development, perhaps less durable in its materials, that we haven't found. Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who excavated Göbekli Tepe from 1996 until his death in 2014, had a theory about what the site was for. Not a settlement, there is no evidence of domestic occupation. No hearths in the domestic sense, no storage pits, no animal bones for meals in the way that would be expected if people were living there. Instead, Schmidt argued, Göbekli Tepe was a gathering place, a pilgrimage site, a location where communities from a wide surrounding region, perhaps a region of hundreds of kilometers, given the labor that the construction required, came together for ritual purposes. And Schmidt went further, with an inversion of the conventional sequence that has been provocative and fruitful for the field. If Göbekli Tepe required large gatherings of people, those gatherings required food on a scale that the immediate local environment probably could not provide through hunting and gathering alone. The need to feed the pilgrims, Schmidt suggested, may have been one of the pressures that drove the development of agriculture, not the cause of monument building, but its consequence. The temple first. The grain fields to feed the worshippers second. It's a hypothesis, not a certainty. The relationship between Göbekli Tepe and the origins of agriculture in the region, the Fertile Crescent, where wheat and barley and several other crops were first domesticated, is still being worked out. But the fact that the site exists, and is what it is, and is as old as it is, means that our model of how complexity and sophistication develop in human societies is more open, more uncertain, more interesting than it was before the site was found. About 8,000 years ago, the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe were deliberately filled in. Not destroyed, filled in. The stone pillars were buried under rubble and soil, carefully, methodically, as if whatever purpose the enclosures had served was complete and the appropriate response was not to abandon them but to inter them. To give them a burial. The burial preserved them. The layers of fill that covered the pillars protected them from the weathering that has worn away so much other prehistoric stonework. When the excavation reached them, the carvings were still sharp. The foxes still ran across the pillar surfaces. The vultures still spread their wings. Most of Göbekli Tepe is still buried. Only about 5% of the site has been excavated. The rest is there, under the hill, waiting for the archaeologists of future generations who will have better tools and better questions than we have now. The decision to leave it unexcavated was deliberate. The archaeologists working at the site have chosen to leave the majority of it for future researchers, against the day when technology allows for the extraction of information that current methods cannot reach. So Göbekli Tepe waits, as it has always waited. The enclosures that were buried 8,000 years ago remain buried. The questions they might answer remain unasked or unanswered. The animals on the pillars are still there, in the dark, in the particular cool darkness of a buried limestone chamber, patient as stone. On the hilltop above the excavated areas, the wind moves through the grass in exactly the way it would have moved through the grass 11,000 years ago. The view from the ridge is remarkable, the landscape of the upper Tigris-Euphrates basin spreading out below in every direction, the same landscape that the pilgrims who built this place would have crossed to reach it. The hill itself doesn't look like much from the outside. It just bulges a little, the way limestone ridges do. Sit with that image for a moment. The hill that doesn't look like much. The grass moving in the wind. And underneath, the circles of stone, and the animals frozen in the act of being alive, and the questions we don't know how to ask yet, and the darkness that preserves everything it keeps. On the western coast of India, in the state of Gujarat, there is a city called Dwarka. It is a real city, a modern city, with a population of several tens of thousands of people, and it sits on the coast of the Arabian Sea at the westernmost tip of the Kathiawar Peninsula. It is a pilgrimage site of great importance in the Hindu tradition, associated with the god Krishna, who is said in the epic texts to have established his great kingdom there, a magnificent city called Dwaraka, which the texts describe as gleaming and golden, surrounded by the sea, eventually submerged beneath the ocean when Krishna left the world. The convergence of the mythological tradition and the archaeological fact is interesting. Near the modern city of Dwarka, underwater archaeological surveys have found structures, walls, architectural remains, in the shallow waters of the Arabian Sea just off the coast, at depths shallow enough for divers to access. These structures are genuinely there. They have been documented by the Archaeological Survey of India. They are not natural geological formations. Their geometry is too regular, their arrangement too deliberate. They appear to be the remains of an ancient settlement, older than the current city, now beneath the sea because the sea level has risen since its occupation. How old, exactly, is uncertain. Some of the remains appear to be from the historic period, not especially ancient. Others may be older, potentially much older. The site is still being studied, and the dating of underwater structures is technically challenging. And in the Gulf of Khumbat, somewhat to the south, a marine archaeological survey conducted in 2001 by sonar found what appeared to be geometric structures on the sea floor at a depth of about 40 meters. These structures, if they are indeed artificial, which has not been conclusively established, would be very old. The sea floor at that depth was last above water, given the post-glacial sea level rise, approximately 9,000 years ago. Which would make these structures, if they are genuinely man-made, among the oldest architectural remains ever found. The interpretation is disputed. The sediment samples from the site produced ambiguous results. Some readings suggested very ancient materials, others were less clear. The structures have not been directly excavated, and the sonar images alone do not definitively establish their nature. Marine archaeology at these depths is technically demanding, and the work of confirming or disconfirming the interpretation of the Gulf of Khumbat structures is ongoing. The honest position is, something interesting is there. What exactly it is, and what it means, we do not yet know with certainty. What we know with great certainty is the civilization that flourished along the western coast of the Indian subcontinent and into the Indus River Valley in the 3rd millennium BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization, also called the Harappan Civilization, one of the great Bronze Age civilizations of the ancient world and in some ways the most mysterious of them all. The great cities of the Indus civilization, Mohenjo-Daro in what is now Pakistan, Harappa somewhat to the north, Dholavira on a Gujarat island, and dozens of other sites across a territory roughly the size of Western Europe, were urban in the fullest sense. They had street grids. They had drainage systems, not just for individual buildings but for entire neighborhoods, a network of covered drains carrying wastewater from houses into larger sewers, the kind of urban sanitation infrastructure that most of the ancient world did not develop until much later. The houses of ordinary residents, not just elites, had bathrooms connected to the drainage system. The city planners, whoever they were, had thought about where the water went. The standardization that the Indus civilization achieved is striking. The baked bricks used in construction across hundreds of sites throughout the civilization are of remarkably consistent dimensions, a standard ratio of approximately 1:2:4 between the three dimensions of the brick, consistent across the entire extent of the civilization regardless of local geography. The weights used in trade are similarly standardized, a system of measured weights in specific ratios, consistent across the civilization, that allowed merchants in Mohenjo-Daro to use the same scales as merchants in Lothal on the Gujarat coast, hundreds of kilometers away. This standardization implies coordination. It implies a shared system of measurement, shared manufacturing standards, The kind of organized agreement about the basics of trade and construction that requires some form of administrative communication across the whole territory. And yet we have found no palace, no obvious administrative center, no equivalent of the Egyptian pharaoh or the Mesopotamian king in the evidence from the Indus civilization. Who made these decisions? Who enforced the standards? We don't know. We don't know because we cannot read their writing. The Indus script, approximately 400 distinct signs, found on thousands of small carved seals made from steatite or faience, used apparently for marking goods in trade or administration, has not been deciphered. It is one of the last major undeciphered scripts in the world, and despite decades of effort using every analytical tool available, including computational methods, it has not yielded to interpretation. The seals themselves are beautiful objects. Small, about 2 centimeters square, or sometimes a bit larger, carved with remarkable precision. Most of them show an animal, a bull, a rhinoceros, an elephant, a tiger, a composite creature with elements of several animals, depicted in profile, with the script signs above. The animals are specific and carefully observed. The unicorn bull, technically a bull shown in profile with one horn, appears so frequently that it has become the emblem of the civilization. Whatever the animal meant to the Indus people, whether it was associated with a deity, a clan, a trading house, a ruler, we cannot say. The seals were used to make impressions in wet clay, which would be attached to goods being shipped, as a seal of origin or ownership or both. Seals and their clay impressions have been found not just at Indus sites but in Mesopotamia, in the cities of Sumer and Akkad, thousands of kilometers away, testimony to the long-distance trade connections of the Indus world. The seals carry messages that we cannot read. They have been carrying them for 4,000 years. The messages are still there, pressed into the stone in whatever sequence of signs conveys whatever meaning was intended, patient and silent. The civilization itself ended around 1900 BCE. Its great cities gradually abandoned over a period of several centuries rather than destroyed in a single catastrophic event. Climate change, specifically a shift in the monsoon patterns that reduced the rainfall the agricultural system depended on, is the leading current explanation. The rivers that watered the fields changed their courses. The landscape dried. The cities contracted and eventually were left. They are still there. Mohenjo-Daro, excavated since the 1920s, still standing in the desert of Sindh, the brick walls of its houses and its drainage system, the layout of its streets, the platforms where the great public buildings stood. Still there in the dry air of the Indus plain, its bricks fading slowly in the sun, its drainage channels still following the logic that the city planners built into them 4,500 years ago. And the seals, in their museum cases in Karachi and Delhi and London and Washington, still carved with their animals and their unread text, still asking the question that no one has yet answered. In the library, it was always quiet. This is almost certainly true, though of course we cannot know it directly. The Great Library of Alexandria, founded in the early 3rd century BCE by the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt, who had inherited Egypt from the generals who divided Alexander the Great's empire after his death, was a research institution as much as a library, housed within the larger Mausoleum complex, the precursor of what we now call a museum. a temple to the muses that supported scholars in residence and the pursuit of knowledge of every kind. What it was like to be there, to be one of the scholars resident at the Mausoleum, or simply a visitor with the right credentials to access the collection, we can only imagine, based on what we know of the institution from references in ancient texts. And those references suggest a place of considerable grandeur, covered colonnades where scholars could walk and think and talk, reading rooms with the light coming in from the right direction at the right angle for reading, the smell of the papyrus rolls in their cedar cases, the dusty, specific, very old smell of ancient libraries, that is, the smell of the papyrus itself slowly drying in the Egyptian heat and releasing its particular chemistry into the air. The papyrus rolls, that is how books existed in the ancient world, for the most part. Not bound volumes but long rolls of papyrus paper, made from the pith of the papyrus plant that grew in the delta of the Nile, written in columns that you would unroll from one end and re-roll as you read, the text appearing and disappearing as the roll moved through your hands. Large works were spread across multiple rolls. The identifying tag, a small label hanging from the end of the roll, giving the author and title, was how you found what you were looking for in a collection. Row upon row of shelves, or perhaps the niches in a wall, with the rolls resting horizontally and their tags hanging down, in the manner of a very large and very orderly linen closet. The collection at its height may have contained between 40,000 and 700,000 rolls. The ancient estimates vary wildly, and the truth is probably somewhere in the broad range between them. What is certain is that it was the largest collection of books in the ancient world, assembled through systematic effort that included, famously, the practice of borrowing books from ships arriving in the harbor of Alexandria, making copies, and returning the copies while keeping the originals. The originals were better for the collection. The owners presumably consoled themselves with their new copies. What was in those rolls matters enormously, because a significant portion of it is gone. We know what Aristotle wrote, not because we have all of it, but because ancient catalogs and references tell us he wrote approximately 200 treatises. We have 31, more or less. The rest, works on comedy, on poetry beyond the surviving poetics, on medicine, on detailed natural history observations, on the specific constitutions of 158 Greek city-states, of which we have only the Athenian constitution. The rest is gone. Gone from the ancient world over the centuries of the library's decline, gone before the library itself was gone, in the ordinary attrition of a world without mechanical reproduction where every text existed in only a limited number of copies. The plays of Sophocles. He wrote, ancient sources suggest, approximately 123 plays. We have 7. The other 116, including all the plays that the ancient world most admired, since the 7 that survived were not necessarily the most celebrated, are gone. The pre-Socratic philosophers, Anaximander, Anaximenes, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Empedocles, wrote extensively, developed systematic accounts of the nature of the physical world that are the beginning of natural science in the Western tradition. We have fragments. Quotations preserved in later texts because a later writer thought the fragment worth preserving. The original works are gone. And Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes was a scholar who served as the head librarian of the Library of Alexandria in the 3rd century BCE, which means he had access to the best collection of knowledge in the world at the time, and he used it. He calculated the circumference of the Earth. The method was elegant. He knew that on the summer solstice, in the city of Syene in southern Egypt, now Aswan, the sun at noon was directly overhead. A vertical stick would cast no shadow, and the sun's light would reach the bottom of a deep well. He also knew that on the same day, at the same hour, in Alexandria to the north, a vertical stick did cast a shadow. He measured the angle of that shadow, approximately 7 degrees, or about 1/50th of a full circle. He knew the distance between Syene and Alexandria, approximately 5,000 stadia, a unit of measurement whose exact length is debated but was probably around 160 meters. And he combined these facts with the geometry of a sphere to calculate that the full circumference of the Earth was approximately 250,000 stadia. In modern measurements, his result was between 39,000 and 46,000 kilometers, depending on which value of the stadian you use. The actual circumference of the Earth at the equator is approximately 40,075 kilometers. He got it essentially right. He measured the whole Earth with a stick and a shadow and the distance between two cities. The work in which he set out this calculation, the Geographica, is lost. We know about the calculation from later writers who described it. The original argument, in Eratosthenes' own words, is gone. The library itself did not end in a single dramatic burning. This is one of the historical myths worth gently correcting, because the myth of the single fire obscures the more interesting and more melancholy reality of a slow decline. Julius Caesar's fire in 48 BCE, which burned when he ordered ships in the harbor destroyed to prevent their use by his enemies, and which spread to the waterfront, may have destroyed a warehouse of books awaiting shipment or export, but it almost certainly did not destroy the library itself, which was not in the harbor. The library continued after Caesar. It continued for centuries. What ended it was the more ordinary fate of institutions that lose their patrons and their purpose, budget cuts, political changes, the departure of scholars to other places when the political climate became inhospitable, the failure to replace damaged or deteriorating roles, the gradual reduction of a great institution to something smaller and then to nothing. By the 3rd or 4th century of the Common Era, it was probably already gone, or reduced to something barely recognizable as the institution it had been. The knowing of all those things, gone. The specific arguments of lost philosophers, the alternative perspectives on nature and mathematics and the cosmos that were developed and written down and placed on the shelves and then, over centuries, not preserved. The plays whose stories we will never know. The histories of civilizations that we now reconstruct from fragments and inference because the primary accounts are gone. All of it was once in those cedar cases, with their small identifying tags hanging from the ends of the rolls. Somewhere in the clean, papyrus-scented air of rooms in Alexandria, under good light, kept by people who understood their value. The rooms are gone now. Alexandria is still there, a modern city of 5 million people on the Egyptian coast, built on and around the site of the ancient city, which is mostly under the modern city and partly under the harbor. Underwater archaeological surveys have found remains of the ancient city in the shallow water of the harbor, columns, blocks of stone, the foundations of buildings that slid into the sea during ancient earthquakes. The ancient lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, collapsed in medieval earthquakes, and its stones have been found on the harbor floor. But the books are not on the harbor floor. Books don't survive immersion. What the library held is simply gone, into the air, into the slow chemistry of degradation, into the centuries of neglect. Not stolen, not burned in a single dramatic moment, just lost. Gradually. Over time. In the way that things get lost when no one is making the constant effort to keep them. Now let's go somewhere else entirely. Let me take you to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Not to one of the famous islands, not to Hawaii or Tahiti or the places that Pacific exploration brought into the wider world's consciousness. To a smaller island, less known, in the eastern Caroline Islands of Micronesia, Pohnpei. And just off the eastern shore of Pohnpei, built on the coral reef in the shallow water of the lagoon, there is a city. Or rather, there are the ruins of a city. The ruins of Nan Madol. Nan Madol is one of the most extraordinary and least known archaeological sites in the world, and the fact that it is little known is partly a matter of remoteness and partly, perhaps, a matter of the world's inconsistent attention. It was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site only in 2016, relatively recently, and even now it receives far fewer visitors than its significance warrants. The site consists of approximately 100 artificial islets built on the coral reef, arranged in a rough rectangular grid and connected by tidal canals. The islets are not natural, they are constructed from basalt columns and coral blocks, built up above the level of the water to create platforms on which buildings could be placed. The basalt columns used in the construction are remarkable objects in themselves, long, hexagonal, or pentagonal prisms of volcanic stone, naturally formed in the cooling of ancient lava flows, stacked in alternating layers like enormous log cabins, creating walls of considerable strength and considerable weight. The largest of these columns weigh up to 50 tons each. They were quarried from a volcanic outcrop on the opposite side of Pohnpei Island, several kilometers away across difficult terrain and open water. How they were transported to the site of Nan Madol and positioned in the construction is genuinely unknown. The people of Pohnpei at the time of construction, roughly from 1200 CE onward, with the main construction during the Sotalar dynasty that ruled from approximately 1100 to 1628 CE, had no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, no draft animals. They had human labor, ingenuity, and the sea. The local traditions offer explanations involving magic. The basalt columns were flown through the air by sorcerers. This is not a dismissive or naive explanation, it is the form in which a difficult and impressive technical achievement was encoded in memory for transmission across generations that didn't witness it. The achievement was real. The mechanism of the achievement has not been reconstructed by modern analysis. Nan Madol was not, primarily, a residential city. It was an administrative and ceremonial center, the place where the Sotalar rulers lived with their nobles and priests, surrounded by the symbolic and practical architecture of their power, while the ordinary people of Pohnpei lived on the main island and sent tribute across the water by canoe. The islets had different functions. Some were associated with specific clans or ritual purposes, some with the preparation and storage of food for the elite, some with mortuary practices, some with the housing of the ruling family and their immediate circle. The largest and most elaborately constructed islet is Nanduas, which served as the mortuary complex for the Sotalar rulers, a high-walled enclosure, its basalt walls still standing several meters tall, within which the rulers were buried. The walls of Nanduwas are impressive even now, after centuries of salt water and vegetation and the patient chemistry of tropical air, massive, dark, surprisingly vertical for a structure built without mortar from stacked basalt columns, their weight and the friction between their surfaces holding them together through centuries. The canals between the islets are tidal. The sea moves through them twice a day, as it moves through all the spaces that connect to the ocean beyond the reef. When the tide comes in, the water rises through the stone passages between the islets, flooding the lower-lying areas, covering the coral and the sandy bottom of the channels with a meter or more of warm, clear salt water. When the tide goes out, the water withdraws, leaving the passages temporarily dry, the coral exposed, the marine life that lives in the interstices visible and then covered again. The city breathes. That is the only word for it. Twice a day, in the rhythm of the tidal cycle that has been running since the ocean existed, the city of Nan Madol breathes, the water rising through its stone corridors and then withdrawing, the city expanding and contracting with the sea that surrounds it and passes through it. Imagine what it sounded like. In the deep of night, when the Sotalar rulers and their priests were sleeping on their islets, the canals would carry the sound of the moving water, not the sound of waves breaking on a shore, but the quieter sound of water rising through enclosed spaces, filling the stone passages with the soft, continuous, absolutely reliable sound of the tide doing what the tide has always done. This sound, constant and rhythmic and entirely indifferent to the human activity occurring on the islets above the water, would have been the background of every night in Nan Madol for the 4 or 5 centuries of its occupation. The mangrove has come back. The ruins of Nan Madol today are extensively overgrown. The mangrove trees, whose roots are perfectly adapted to the brackish, tidal conditions of the site, have established themselves in the walls and the spaces between the basalt columns, their roots working slowly into the joints of the stone, both holding some structures together and pulling others apart. The walls disappear under vegetation. The canals are partly blocked by fallen stone and growing root systems. The city that was built out of the lagoon is, very slowly, going back into the lagoon. It is accessible only by boat. Visitors, relatively few, given the remoteness of Pohnpei and the difficulty of the journey to the site from the main island, approach by small motorboat through the reef passage and then navigate the canals between the islets, the mangrove pressing in on both sides, the basalt walls appearing and disappearing in the vegetation, the water moving beneath the boat with the particular quality of shallow, reef-protected, warm water Pacific calm. The sound of the water in the stone passages is still there. The tide still comes and goes, twice a day, through the ruins of a city that was built on water to be governed by a people who understood water in all its moods and rhythms. The city still breathes. Slower now, perhaps, with more of it underwater and more of it overgrown, but still in the same rhythm it has always been in. The water. Rising. And then withdrawing. Rising. And then withdrawing again. The Sahara is not what it always was. This surprises people, which is understandable. The Sahara Desert is so completely itself, so dry, so vast, so apparently absolute in its aridity, that it is difficult to imagine it as anything other than what it is now. But the geological record is clear, and the cave paintings confirm it, and the bones of hippopotami found in what are now waterless wadis confirm it. The Sahara was, not so very long ago in geological terms, green. Between approximately 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, in a period that paleoclimatologists call the African humid period or the Green Sahara, the climate of northern Africa was dramatically different from today. Higher rainfall, driven by changes in the Earth's orbit that brought more summer solar radiation to the northern hemisphere and strengthened the monsoon, transformed the Sahara. Lakes formed in basins that are now salt flats. Rivers flowed in channels that are now dry and wind-blown. Savanna grassland and open woodland-covered landscapes that are now absolute desert. And in that green Sahara, people lived. The cave paintings at Tassili and Ajur in what is now southern Algeria are among the most remarkable archaeological finds in Africa. A gallery of prehistoric art covering an area of roughly 72,000 square kilometers, the largest known collection of prehistoric cave art in the world, depicting in careful detail a world that no longer exists in that place. Cattle, herded by people wearing clothes and carrying implements. Hippopotami, wallowing in rivers. Giraffes, moving through open woodland. Crocodiles. Elephants. The full suite of large African fauna that today is confined to regions far south of the Sahara, depicted in a landscape that is now so dry that the animals could not survive in it for a day. The people who painted these images were not visiting. They were living there. They herded their cattle through the green valleys of what is now the Algerian desert, and they painted what they saw in the rock shelters of the stone massif, and they left behind one of the most complete visual records of a vanished world that archaeology has found anywhere. The desert came slowly. The same orbital changes that had brought the rains gradually reversed, and the monsoon weakened, and the rains became less frequent, and the lakes began to shrink, and the rivers ran only seasonally, and then only in exceptional years, and the vegetation contracted southward following the rainfall, and the sand moved in to fill the spaces where the plants had held the soil in place. The people moved too. Southward, following the water and the grass, or north toward the Mediterranean coast. The communities that had lived in the Green Sahara dispersed into the surrounding regions, their cattle culture contributing to the development of the pastoral traditions of sub-Saharan Africa, their genetic and cultural legacy flowing outward from a homeland that was becoming uninhabitable. They left things behind. Tools, stone circles, the paintings on the rock shelter walls, and the occasional burial, the remains of people who lived in the Green Sahara and were buried there and whose bones are now in the desert. In the desert of what is now southern Libya, the Garamantian civilization built an extraordinary underground infrastructure to maintain agriculture in an environment that was already dry by the time they flourished, from approximately 500 BCE to 700 CE. The Fog Eris, a system of tunnels and shafts dug through the rock to tap underground water, similar in principle to the Persian Khanate, ran for hundreds of kilometers through the desert, bringing water from the water table to the surface at points where it could be used for irrigation. The engineering required to build these tunnels, on the gradient necessary to make water flow by gravity over such distances, without modern instruments and with the hand tools available in the ancient world, was considerable. The Garamantian cities are largely buried in sand now. The Fog Eris have collapsed or silted in many places, though sections of them are still identifiable in aerial and satellite photography. the dotted lines of the shaft openings visible from the air, marking the underground tunnels that still run beneath the desert. And further east, on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in what is now the Xinjiang region of western China, the cities of the ancient Silk Road, Naya, Lolan, Dandan Oilik, and others, lie under the sand. They were trading cities, positioned along the routes that carried silk and other goods between China and the civilizations to the west, sheltered in the oases where underground water reached the surface at the desert's edge. When the water dried up, or changed course, or when the political circumstances that had made the trade routes viable changed, the cities were abandoned. The people left. The desert moved in. And there the cities stayed. The Dariem Basin where these cities are found is extraordinarily dry, some of the driest air in the world, which means preservation in those buried rooms is remarkable. When the British archaeologist Aurel Stein explored these sites in the early 20th century, he found things that should not have survived, by any ordinary logic of material decay, documents written on wood, still legible. Silk textiles, their colors faded but their weave still intact. Wooden furniture, still assembled, still in the rooms where it was left. A bowl still on a table, or near enough to suggest that it was left in haste, or simply left when the last resident walked out and did not come back. The clothing folded on a shelf. The letter left on the floor, its recipient somewhere on the road, never delivered. The personal objects, the combs, the small carved implements, the things that tell you that a real person lived in this specific room and used these specific things and went about their specific daily life in the way that people always do, still there in the dark of the buried rooms, patient in the dry cold, waiting. The mummies of the Taklamakan are among the strangest things the desert has kept. In the burial grounds of the ancient oasis communities, the dry air and the salt of the desert have preserved bodies from the Bronze Age, people who lived in the Dariem Basin 3,000 and more years ago, their skin and hair and clothing still intact. And many of these mummies have features that suggest connections to populations far to the west, the reddish or light brown hair, the tall stature, the woolen textiles they were buried in that are similar in their weave patterns to textiles from Central Asia and even Europe. Ancient DNA analysis is now beginning to clarify who these people were and how they got to the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in the Bronze Age. They were not a single population. The genetics suggest multiple waves of ancestry, different groups arriving at different times, mixing with each other and with the populations already in the region. The picture is complex, as it always is when you look closely enough. The simple narrative of East and West meeting at a dramatic moment gives way to a more intricate reality of multiple populations, multiple movements, the slow braiding of human groups over thousands of years. But whoever they were there. In the oasis towns at the desert's edge, traveling the routes that would eventually become the Silk Road, wearing their wool and their leather, eating the food that the desert could provide when there was still water enough to grow it. Their faces are still their faces. Their clothing is still around them, the colors faded to beige and brown by 3,000 years in the dry dark, but the wool still wool, the weave still the weave. The sand kept them. The sand keeps almost everything, eventually. Let's go back to the water. There is a device in the collection of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens that was found in a shipwreck. The wreck was discovered near the small Greek island of Antikythera in 1900 by sponge divers working the reef, and it yielded, over the course of excavations that continued into the 1970s and beyond, an extraordinary collection of objects, bronze statues, glass vessels, pottery, coins, from what appears to have been a Roman-era cargo ship that went down sometime around 70 to 60 BCE, carrying a shipment of luxury goods from the eastern Mediterranean, probably from Greece or its islands, toward Rome or another Western destination. Among the objects recovered from the wreck was a corroded lump of bronze, roughly the size of a thick paperback book, that didn't look like anything in particular when it came out of the sea. It was encrusted and corroded and in multiple fragments from its time on the sea floor, and its nature wasn't understood for decades after its recovery. What it turned out to be, as the corrosion was carefully cleaned and the fragments reassembled and analyzed, using X-ray and later more sophisticated imaging techniques, was an astronomical computer. A mechanical device of approximately 30 interlocking bronze gears, enclosed in a wooden and bronze case, with dials on its front and back faces, designed to calculate and display the positions of the sun and moon, to predict solar and lunar eclipses, to track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and possibly to model the motions of the 5 planets known to the ancient world. It is called the Antikythera mechanism. The complexity of its gearing, 30-plus gears, some of them very small, all of them precisely cut and fitted, represents a level of mechanical sophistication that would not be matched in Europe until the astronomical clocks of the medieval period, more than 1,000 years later. The specific mechanism it uses to model the varying speed of the moon's orbit, a feature called an epicyclic gear, a gear that orbits around another gear while rotating, is precisely the kind of sophisticated gear system that engineers before the Antikythera discovery would have said was far beyond the capabilities of ancient craftsmen. It was not beyond them. We have the mechanism to prove it. What we don't have is any other example. In all of the ancient world, from all the millennia of ancient history, with all the objects that have been recovered by archaeology on land and at sea, from all of this, one Antikythera mechanism has been found. 1. There must have been others. A device of this sophistication was not invented from nothing. It represents the culmination of a tradition of mechanical knowledge, of gear cutting and gear fitting, and the mathematical understanding of astronomical cycles that would be translated into mechanical motion. There were surely other instruments, other craftsmen, other traditions of mechanical astronomy in the ancient world. And there may well be other mechanisms like this one, or different instruments from the same tradition, embodying the same knowledge in different forms, still on the sea floor. Still in the wrecks that have not been found, or found but not fully excavated, along the ancient maritime routes of the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean sea floor contains thousands of ancient shipwrecks. The ancient sea was busy. Commerce, diplomacy, migration, military movement, the constant flow of goods and people across what was, for more than a millennium, the most commercially and culturally connected body of water in the world. Ships sank regularly, as ships do. The sea floor has them. Only a small fraction of the Mediterranean sea floor has been surveyed at a resolution that could identify wrecks. As the survey technology improves, remotely operated vehicles, autonomous underwater vehicles, multi-beam sonar, more wrecks are found. And each wreck is an archive. A cargo ship carrying wine in amphoras from the Greek islands to Rome and Italy carries, in its hold, information about the wine trade of a specific decade. A luxury goods ship like the Antikythera wreck carries whatever it was carrying: the bronze statues, the glassware, and the extraordinary mechanism whose existence transforms our understanding of ancient technology. What else is down there? The question is not rhetorical. It is a genuine question, and the answer is, we don't know. And the answer to the deeper question, what might change our understanding of the ancient world in the way that the Antikythera mechanism changed it, is also we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, which is the most interesting condition for a field of inquiry to be in. The sea holds what it holds. The wrecks sit on the floor in the cold dark, their cargo undisturbed, their wood slowly being consumed by marine organisms or converted into mineral forms by the chemistry of deep water preservation, their bronze and ceramic and glass and stone contents settling into the sediment with infinite patience. And perhaps on the floor of some quiet section of the Mediterranean, in the shadow of a reef, or in the deep water between two ancient islands, there is another mechanism. Another set of bronze gears, corroded into a solid lump, unrecognizable from the outside, sitting in the sediment next to an amphora that still, improbably, holds some desiccated residue of the wine it carried 2,200 years ago. The gears still fit together. They always will. Bronze doesn't forget the shape it was given. The ocean floor is quiet. The water above it moves, as it always moves, in its tidal and current rhythms. But the floor itself is still. And in that stillness, the patient, accumulating deposit of sediment covers everything slowly, year by year, century by century, millennium by millennium. The Antikythera mechanism was under about 60 meters of water for 2,000 years before the sponge divers found it. It was not aware of being found. It was not waiting in any active sense. It was simply there, as it had always been there, as it would have continued to be there indefinitely if the sponge divers had found a different reef to work. It was just there. Patient. Let me tell you about things that are patient. Not as a lecture, not as a list. Just as a series of images, forming slowly in the dark, each one taking its time, each one carrying its own quiet weight. There is a date palm tree growing in the Arava Valley in Israel. It was grown from a seed that was found in an archaeological excavation at the site of Masada, the ancient fortress on the Dead Sea Cliff, and that was determined by radiocarbon dating to be approximately 2,000 years old. 2,000 years. The seed was kept in storage, first in the dry darkness of the Masada site itself, through the long centuries of its abandonment, and then in an archaeological storage facility, and in 2005, a botanist named Elaine Solowy planted it. Carefully, with the appropriate attention to the conditions that a 2,000-year-old seed might need, not knowing whether it would respond. It responded. It germinated. It grew. And now it is a palm tree, tall enough to produce dates, the fruit of a variety of date palm that had been thought extinct, the ancient Judean date palm, mentioned in classical sources and depicted in ancient art, its specific genetics lost to history. The seed kept the genetics. For 2,000 years in the dark, the seed kept what the tree knew. There is amber. The fossilized resin of ancient trees, golden and translucent and extraordinarily good at keeping things. Insects trapped in amber tens of millions of years ago are preserved in 3 dimensions, their exoskeletons intact, their wings still in the position of their last moment of movement, the fine structure of their compound eyes still recognizable, the specific species they belong to still determinable by entomologists who have spent careers learning to recognize these forms. The insects themselves are gone, their soft tissues did not survive, only their outer structures, but the shape of them, the form of a moment from the Cretaceous or the Eocene, is preserved in the resin that trapped them. The amber keeps the shape. It has always kept the shape. It will keep the shape long after any current human institution has dissolved. There are the ships on the sea floor. Thousands of them, along the ancient routes of the Mediterranean and the Atlantic and the Pacific. Some of them still have their amphoras in the hold, sealed with their original stoppers, the contents still inside, desiccated, perhaps, or converted to some residual mineral form by the chemistry of centuries, but still they're in the form that tells you what they contained and where they were going when the ship went down. The cargo was not delivered, but it is still there. There are the rooms at Herculaneum. Pompeii is the famous one, the city destroyed by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 CE, buried in ash and pumice, excavated since the 18th century and now among the most visited archaeological sites in the world. But Herculaneum, the smaller city that was buried by a different process, buried by pyroclastic flow, the fast-moving avalanche of hot gas and ash and volcanic debris that descended from the mountain and filled the streets and the buildings with a superheated, suffocating surge, Herculaneum was buried deeper, and its preservation is in some ways more complete. And there are rooms in Herculaneum that have not been opened. The excavation of the ancient city continues, slowly, constrained by the modern city of Herculano built above it and by the difficulty of excavating through the solidified pyroclastic material that fills the ancient spaces. And in the areas that have not yet been reached, beneath streets and buildings that can be mapped by ground-penetrating radar but not yet accessed, there are rooms. Sealed since 79 CE. Containing whatever they contained on the last day of the city's existence. The organic material in Herculaneum has been preserved in ways that organic material rarely is in archaeological contexts. Furniture, wooden objects, food, textiles, the contents of shelves and storage spaces. The Villa of the Papyri, a great private library found at the site, contained approximately 1,800 carbonized papyrus scrolls, books, effectively, their text still legible through techniques that analyze the carbon structure of the charred rolls without physically unrolling them, because physical unrolling would destroy them. The scrolls contain Epicurean philosophical texts, and scholars are working slowly through the digital unrolling process to read what is there. In the rooms not yet reached, what might be there? More scrolls, perhaps. Different scrolls, from different traditions, different subjects. Books that weren't in the Villa of the Papyri. Books that were in ordinary houses, on ordinary shelves, read by ordinary people who had no idea they were preserving something. The personal libraries of the inhabitants of Herculaneum, sealed since the morning they died, waiting. The Antikythera mechanism gears still fit together. The Akrotiri frescoes are still the colors of their first morning. The Göbekli Tepe pillars still stand in their circles, the animals still carved, still mid-movement, still carrying whatever meaning they were carved to carry. The Indus seals still carry their unread messages, still waiting for the scholar who finds the key. The Doggerland rivers still run in the sediment of the North Sea floor, their channels still visible in the bathymetric data, still following the gradient of the landscape they carved before the sea rose over them. The letter from the king of Ugarit, the one found still in the kiln, still being fired, never sent, is in a museum now. The clay is hard. The Akkadian cuneiform signs are still readable, still carrying their urgent message. All of it is still there. All of it patient. The world is remarkably good at keeping things. Come back to the ocean now. Let it come in around you, in the dark of wherever you are lying, in the comfortable warmth of your particular night. The ocean as you have moved through it tonight, not as a thing to cross or to navigate, but as a thing that covers and keeps, that moves over everything with its indifferent, constant motion, carrying nothing off and losing nothing, simply covering. The ocean covers the places where Doggerland was. It covers the underwater shelf where the continental geography of a pre-glacial world is still visible in the depth and texture of the sea floor. It covers the harbor of Alexandria, where the stones of the ancient lighthouse lie in the shallow water, and the columns of the ancient city lie tumbled and encrusted, and the memory of the papyrus rolls in their cedar cases has long since dissolved into the salt water that now fills the space where the building stood. The ocean covered Thera when the eruption collapsed the caldera, the water filling the bowl of the volcanic remnant, the Aegean flooding in, the crescent shape of Santorini forming as the remaining rim of the caldera, the deep blue of the caldera water filling the space where the summit had been. The people who left Akrotiri were somewhere, on Crete, on another island, somewhere on the water in their ships, when the island behind them collapsed. When what had been the highest point of their homeland became the bottom of a deep water bay. And the ocean covers the prehistoric coastlines, the shorelines of 30,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, the places where the water met the land when the land was different and the world was different, and the people who lived on those shores are the ancestors of people who are alive now, who carry in their DNA the genetic legacy of communities that lived on land that is now the sea floor. The water doesn't know this. The ocean moves as it has always moved, the tides in their twice-daily rhythm, the currents in their vast millennial loops, the waves in their local and variable expressions of wind and weather. The ocean doesn't know what it covers. It doesn't keep anything intentionally. It is simply very large and very patient and very, very good at not disturbing what it has covered. You are somewhere between the surface and the floor. Not sinking. Not rising. Just suspended in the particular warmth and darkness that the water holds at depth, the temperature stable, the light gone entirely, the sound reduced to the deep, low frequencies that carry through water for hundreds of kilometers. The whale song, somewhere in the distance, that you can feel more than hear. The creak of the water under its own weight. The patient, geological sound of the world at rest. The things on the sea floor are resting. The things in the desert sand are resting. The things in the jungle, the pyramids wrapped in centuries of growth, the stone walls hidden under the root systems of trees that have been growing for 1,000 years, the plazas covered in the accumulating depth of the forest floor, are resting. The carved pillars at Göbekli Tepe are resting in their deliberate dark, the animals frozen in their moment of being, the abstract symbols carrying their unknown meanings through the 11,500 years since the hands that carved them were warm. All of it is resting. The world rests too. Not in the way you are resting now, not in the way of an exhausted body finding its horizontal and releasing into it. The world rests in the way of stone, in the way of sediment, in the way of things that have been still for so long that stillness is simply what they are. You don't need to keep any of this. You don't need to remember the names of the sites or the dates of the civilizations or the specific details of the frescoes or the letters or the mechanisms. The information can go now, gently, the way the tide goes out, returning to wherever information goes when you're not attending to it, leaving only the feeling of what the night contained. The feeling of great distances, of deep time, of things that have waded through enormous spans of duration without distress, simply present in whatever form the world kept them. The feeling of the ocean moving, very slowly, over everything. The water is still moving. It has always moved. Over the river channels that were rivers before the sea was there. Over the harbor where the stones of the lighthouse lie. Over the places where the people of Doggerland watched the water come closer every year, their whole lifetimes, and the lifetimes of their parents before them. The water is still moving. Over all of it. Very gently. The way it always has.